Hello, I'm Dr. David Rosensweet, and you've tuned in to I Wonder Doctor Live, our second hour on Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And this is a time that we like to devote to that aspect that's so important for medicine, is to address one of the drivers of illness and one of the interferers with health, and that is a misuse of the biological stress response. Too much, too intense, too often. We activate all the chemistry and we suppress the immune system when we're responding to fight or flight. And so I love to address this with my patients. I've spent most of my adult life acquiring the information and tools for my own self, for my own emotions, mind, and life. And also, 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon, I Wonder Doctor Live. And listen, if you have any personal issues that you'd like to discuss during this hour that relates to your life or to your emotions or your mind, please call us at 888-502-8886. I'll interrupt any subject that I'm talking about to go right to assisting you with your own personal issues and with the intention of increasing your knowledge in your tool bag around addressing your own emotions in your own mind. And today, I'd like to talk about a subject that seems to be epidemic and a plague upon the planet. And it's been here before in history, but it seems like it's never been more intense. And that's the inability to be inclusive and the breakdown around communications and the divisions that are taking place in the highest halls of power in the different countries. The people aren't listening to each other, and we're not doing things synergistically, which is something I'd like to address, and it's the cause of tremendous amount of stress. It translates and trickles down right down to be extremely stressful to so many segments of people all over the world. And it comes down to, I think, several ways to look at this. Like, I remember when I was growing up in politics, I was very surprised when I learned that Ronald Reagan and I think his name is Daniel Moynihan. Mr. Reagan was the president, and Daniel Moynihan was, I think he was the Speaker of the House. And they might be tooth and nail on different sides of many different issues, but as the end of the day came, they would get together and have a drink together and have a social hour together. I mean, I get chills when I think about this, that their core, how they operated at their core was personal relationship, respect, and the trying to co-create together. When it came down to it, they were two men, they were two human beings, and they lived out that friendship as well. This is what I see to be so absent in so many of the decision makers these days. And it comes down to, there's a lot of upset, there's a lot of suffering in this world. And there's many voices that speak to that suffering, and in the media and on YouTube and on the internet and everywhere these days. And some voices are very loud and they're very polarized. So in any different media source, whether it's TV or the internet, you can find extremely loud and intense voices on the conservative or the liberal, the right or the left. And I've got those backwards. This is right, this is left. And, it doesn't seem like they're trying to work together anymore. And of course, it's just notorious that government has come to a standstill and it's hard to get anything done, and that people are mad when you do anything. And there's several failures here. I think one of the most common things is the rise of the blame, and thinking that if I get angry enough and upset enough and blame enough, that's going to expose something, and we're all going to rally around the flag and do the thing that I'm railing about, whether it's on the right or whether it's on the left. I see it happening on all ends of this political spectrum. And it comes down to the inability to recognize that we're all in this together as never before. We're all, when it really gets down to it, and some of the most spiritual of advisors and religions and anyone who cares so much about how does the whole thing work realizes we're all one in some way. And it's like a family. You can't have one member of a family doing terribly and the rest of the family ostracizing that person and trying to deny or repress or get rid of them. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in a marriage. If one person is having a really rough time, the other person can't say, well, I'm just going to go on and find a new spouse, or I'm just going to disregard what they're doing. No, we're so interconnected. Children and parents, however you want to look at it, the truth is how any of us up close and personal feel affects everyone. So I think it's so crucial that we get this. Like, it doesn't work to just go into opposition to a brother or a sister or a spouse or a father or a mother or grandparents. It doesn't work. It just leads to injury. The core attitude needs to be something like, hey, what you're saying to me really hurts, and I'm having a hard time listening to it. But you know what? I do want to hear you. I do want to hear what you have to say. Because we're part of a whole, and it's crucial that we address your concerns and we address my concerns. So what does this require? It requires an ability when we're in opposite sides of a discussion, an argument, it seems like we've got discrepant desires, that we're able to sit and listen and let it in. And in order to do that, we have to build the muscle called, I'm willing to be uncomfortable in my own skin. I'm willing to be disturbed emotionally. I'm willing to be upset. And I'm willing to be the safe space for my uncomfortable feelings. I mean, never is this more crucial than in a highly committed relationship, let's say a spousal relationship. It just doesn't work for one person to go silent and not listen. It just doesn't work if the two people in that spousal relationship are not communicating. If someone in the spousal relationship is uncomfortable and there's this repetitive behavior that is continually uncomfortable, let's say one of the spouses, one of the spouse, are drinking alcohol to excess. It doesn't work for the other spouse to not say anything and to just constantly allow the other person to do something that's hurting that individual, the non-drinking spouse. No, there has to be a line of communication. Being a physician, and for quite a while, I've been privy to a lot of up-close and personal issues that exist for people when they're not well, and invariably it's related to their life circumstance, and so often that involves some hurdles that they just can't get through with a spouse. They so much wish that things would be different, and it all begins with, I want to be able to communicate. I want to be able to say what's on my mind, and not only that, I want the other person to listen. And actually, that we come to the truth of what's really so, and if it's true that there's a behavior that needs to be changed, I want the change. I not only want this to be listened to, I want to change if that's the truth of our situation. I'm giving this example of a highly committed relationship like a spousal relationship because I think many of you can relate to that, and there is no way out. In all the years that I've ever worked with individuals and couples, I've never had the sense that there was an automatic bad choice around who someone chose as a spouse. Usually we choose our equals. Now that's not a perfect equation, and sometimes we don't, and sometimes we choose for the wrong reasons. But very often you can see the reasons why people got together. It makes a lot of sense. The more up close and personal I get, I say, yes, I definitely see how they got together, and really in so many ways they're so equal. They might be different, but they're so equal. So I, decades and decades ago, stopped trying to counsel people that, oh, you need to go on and find a new person. No, there's reasons why those people are together. But what did stand out to me is if one of the two was not willing to listen to the other and respond to the other, and if they had abandoned communication and they did not have or learn successful communication, that could end in breakdown. That could end in divorce. If someone was committed to finding out what the truth really is and acquiring the information and tools to improve the situation, and the other refused to listen, refused to communicate, just shut down, that was the thing that didn't work. That's what my own personal opinion. I'm sure the other professionals in the field would have many other things to contribute about this. But what is the core problem there? They weren't willing to say what their truth was and to let in the truth of the other person, no matter how uncomfortable it made them. And you know, of course, this is not an easy thing, because if someone that we're so close to, the person we're closest to in the world, is trying to tell us about a behavior of ours or an attitude of ours that doesn't work and is hurtful, the pain and the suffering that can be felt if you listen, that's the bottom line. So often people don't necessarily have skills to deal with their own internal pain. Oh my goodness, that would be a reason to block, but I'm trying to break it down to, and that's a skill we want to acquire. That's knowledge we want to acquire. Very often when someone in my life, and I have quite a few people who are very up close and personal, when they want to tell me something about how what I'm doing is not working for them, oh my goodness, I can get as uncomfortable as I can get. Why do I get so uncomfortable? Because usually they're right. And usually what they're naming is a place of particular weakness in me that has always given me trouble, and underneath it there is emotional pain and suffering within myself. One of the skills that I have learned is I can listen. If someone that matters to me wants to communicate to me, I have developed the skill to listen, even though it hurts. And there's different ways they can communicate. The more I'm willing to listen, the less intense and upset and angry that they need to be to get their information through to me. But I've learned to listen even when they're upset, because it's often when they're upset that finally it breaks over and they're able to get the communication out. And I've come to treasure and realize the crucial importance of someone that's close to me. If there's some way that they're involved with me that is painful for them, I know this is the very thing I want to hear, even though it's high likely to hurt me. And I give this example to my patients. I say, you know, if I were to say to you, patient, I'll pretend you and the camera are my patient. If I were to say to you, I know the reason why you're sick. There's a midnight bank robber in this town, and you're it. And every night you're going out and breaking the law at midnight, and you're going and busting into banks and stealing from them, and this is the reason you're sick. And I pause, and I'm going to ask you, patient on the other side of this camera, you don't have to be a patient, it's a person on the other side of this camera. How'd you feel when I said, I know what's giving you trouble, it's you are the midnight bank robber. And that's a violation, and that's giving, your moral code can't stand it. Well, the usual response of someone is, what? I don't feel a thing, Doc. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I say, that's my point, because if I'm accusing you of something that's not the truth, it doesn't even ring a bell. You know, what? Doesn't make any sense at all. But if someone were to say to me, David, I don't like how many times a day you can get grouchy, and I want you to be kinder and softer and less harsh and not be so strong on the point that you're trying to get across. Be kinder about it. Be softer about it. It doesn't matter that much. Now, a communication like that could trigger a significant amount of pain because it's the truth, and I know it's the truth. And I'm working with that grouchy or irritable side, and it embarrasses me, and I feel humiliated by it, and I have feelings of shame about that. I'm giving you an example. This is something that I still work with, although I'm a million miles down the road on this one. But what I'm saying is, if your spouse is saying something to you and you're getting really uncomfortable, it's probably not of the genre of you're the midnight bank robber that is totally irrelevant and has nothing to do with you. It's probably much more in the territory of something that is relevant to you, and they're naming something that's hurting you and ways that you're hurting others, and there's emotional pain associated with ways of living and behaviors that don't help and do hurt. So what are they touching on? Ultimately, they're going to be touching on fear inside of me, anger inside of me, shame inside of me, guilt, sadness, etc., hopelessness, powerlessness. So I'm breaking it down to the basics, that when someone is saying something to me and I'm starting to get really uncomfortable about it, I have figured out, and with significant amount of understanding and work, that if I'm uncomfortable, there's probably some truth in it. And this is the very conversation I want to listen to, even though it hurts. In fact, because it hurts so much, it's probably so relevant that I really want to listen. And you can get this skill. You can do it. You could just let go and let it hurt. It's not physical abuse. It's just internal, uncomfortable, emotional pain that's getting triggered. And when it comes down to it, it's just internal fear, or sadness, or anger, or shame, or guilt, or loneliness, or emptiness, or hopelessness. Words that point to core uncomfortable feelings that can be triggered. This is why we don't like to listen, why we want to block, why we want to hide, why we say, don't talk to me anymore. You don't have to tell me about that, you're not right about that. Or the endless excuses, or you're just the withdrawal, the silent withdrawal. This is why we don't want to listen, because certain communications coming from people who know us well and are making observations can trigger our own internal pain. I've always loved the statement, I'm going to pay attention to the splinter in your eye rather than looking at the telephone pole in my own. Because a common reaction to someone speaking up and trying to communicate to you is, you shouldn't say stuff like to me. You've got all that stuff going on in yourself. You're the one we should be talking about. You're the real problem here. Yes, I want to focus on the splinter in your eye rather than the telephone pole in my own. The basic psychology of it is called projection. The pain inside of myself, I want to blame you for. You're the one who's causing my pain. Sort of cruising through the basics of why communication hurts and how they can escalate into big pain. There's another element I would like to look at. When we go to communicate, there's a couple things required. Because I'm so interested in personal freedom, meaning that I feel free, I realize that for me to feel free, I've got to allow and accept. I'll never accept physical violence. I'll never accept crazy off-the-wall communication to me. But when one of my people that I know and love is upset, I've learned to upset I'm sorry, I've learned, yeah, they would say I have learned to upset. I have learned to be the container, the space of the pain that they trigger when they're starting to tell me the truth about how they're uncomfortable with me. If I'm uncomfortable, I've learned to let it happen. Let it happen. What's the worst case? I'm going to feel very uncomfortable. Or, to get more specific about it, I'm going to feel intense shame, like there's something wrong with me. Or intense guilt, like what I do is wrong. Or I'm going to feel angry, or I'm going to feel afraid, or I'm going to feel hopeless. I've decided to build the muscles to be able to feel those feelings. Because if I do, it increases my freedom. And it increases my ability to be in communication with anybody. They can challenge me. And so long as they're not over the top and physically abusive or something like that, because I can sit there and listen and take it, one of the things that I've learned to do is I can learn. I'm listening to what is they're most upset about. I can learn some things, and maybe there is some behaviors and choices that I'm doing that is upsetting to them. And I want to learn what those are. Or maybe what I really learn is, look at this. They're upset with me, but the real truth is they're upset and they're not able to own it. Well, if I can listen and I'm not getting triggered myself, I may be so skilled in my communication that I could say, honey, you know what? I'd like to pause for a moment, and I'd just like you to feel the pain that you're in. Because I think that this is probably also relevant to our situation. I'm bringing up levels of skill and knowledge that we can have in being able to listen to one another. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. The bottom line is, if you develop the muscle to allow your own pain to be unveiled, and you can feel it and accept it and contain it and not reach out and blame someone else for it, you're going to have a skill that's going to carry you through this life so royally, because then your people can talk to you and you can learn, and that they can be, no one ever has to travel to find some guru in some place, because the people up close and personal to us, if we can listen to them, they're going to be able to tell us the very things we need to know to heal and evolve. So bottom line, in very intimate relationships, the ability to listen, the ability to communicate is so crucial to build trust, to reduce fear, to build intimacy. These are the very things that love really is. So you want to build love, you take it down to the basics, and you learn how to increase the security of your partner and reduce their fear and communicate. And this is really what I'm talking about for today's subject, is communicate. And in order to communicate successfully, number one, you need to be able to receive what's being communicated to you. And the worst case scenario is they trigger in you some of the deepest shame and emotional pain that you have. And if you're skilled at just breathing and feeling that, it doesn't take more than that. It's a tall order. It's a skill that can take some time to develop, your ability to feel and accept your own emotional pain, and it's so worth doing. Now, I want to break it out beyond the intimate relationships, our inner circle. Because, well, one more point. It's a very unusual human being that can stand and listen to a communication when the communication coming at them is harsh, where the tone is loud, the upset is great. I'm not going to mimic here on the, I want to leave it to your imagination, but you've probably been in communication in your life where there's shouting, there's screaming, there's accusations, there's shaming, there's you're awful, you're terrible, this is the worst thing I ever heard, you are just a horrible person doing the wrongest thing, you should really be outside of humanity. I'm just conjuring up a few examples. My point is this: there's very human beings that can sit in the face of that, because most commonly we're all a little tender and sensitive around strong communication. And in fact, although there is a beautiful place for clean anger is really unusual. I'm not going to talk about it much right now, but someone who is cleanly angry, they're upset, but they're owning their own pain, and they're not going so far as to say, and you are the cause of all my problems. They're just upset, and they're just trying to get their point across. They're not doing the extra added stuff that can make so many communications exaggerated and brink over from just trying to communicate the truth to being hurtful. And this is part of my point, is we have to have space for our loved ones to be emotional, because probably by the time they want to communicate something that's uncomfortable to them, they're uncomfortable. So to have the criteria that I'll listen to you if you're super nice and loving to me is totally unrealistic. So one of the skills that I treasure, and I think all of us has to develop, is the ability, if someone's upset with us, we need to be able to receive the communication in their upset condition. And we can't be laying down counter conditions like, I'll talk to you when you get it together, but you're obviously off the rails. You're way too emotional for me. Ooh, do I hear people say that one? They're way too emotional. You're supposed to be rational, and I'll talk to you when you have it together. Yeah, well, we pushed them to the point where they're not together. So this is, so again, I say, want to be free? Develop the skill. Develop the strength, develop the backbone, sit there in the face of strong communication, someone being upset with you, and you listen. And your job is to listen. And your job is not to, well, no, they're not right about this, and no, they're wrong about this, and I'm certainly not this way in your own mind. You're sitting there listening, but you're in your own mind. You're just resisting every inch of the way. No, the thing is listen, even if it hurts. Let it in, even if it hurts. You know what? It's odd what a huge accomplishment that is. Well, really, it's one of the elements of being free. You can sit there in the face of people that really matter to you, and they can be upset, and you can listen to their communication, and if they're correct about it, and you're feeling sad about it, or you feel afraid about it, or hopeless about it, or ashamed about it, but you can feel it and you can let it in, you're going to learn something and you're going to grow. And it's a wonderful sense of accomplishment when you develop the skills. I'm not just sitting there and take it. The more skillful you get at this kind of stuff, my goodness, your ability to navigate freely and with compassion and with understanding, it just increases enormously. So the gains are really mostly yours. And the person gets to be heard. And that is really crucial too. I keep trying to break this out to global. And really, so often when I listen to the news these days and listen to the internet commentators, oh my goodness, they have grievances galore. And those grievances, there's a lot to them. They're upset. And they're upset when I listen closely to why the various people are upset. And I mean, whether it's on the right, political right, or the political left, they all seem valid to me. When someone is super upset, very often there's something that is really not okay. And so we want to be able to extend our ability to listen out to the extremes. And of course, when they're talking, very often, some of these commentators, they're very upset, and they are loud voices. And I think there's reasons for that, because I think there's so much suffering, and I think so many people are uncomfortable that upset person on the TV railing against the opposite side is becoming the voice for the dispossessed who also feel a victim of that issue. So it's sort of cathartic in a certain way, but it's dysfunctional. It doesn't work. Because like I was saying, if you're on the other end of being blamed, and you're the cause of the problems on earth and the problems with others, you're not going to do well with that. Very few people have developed the strength to let it just roll right off their skin and let stick what is the truth and let roll off what isn't. There's very few people who have a hide tough enough to do well under those circumstances. And really what it's a plea for is a turnaround to where, yes, commentators expressing grievances have grievances. And very often they're popular because they're vocalizing a common grievance that there's hundreds or thousands or even millions of people that would agree with them about that grievance. And what I'm calling for on a global scale, let's just say within American politics, is that there's a turnaround where these two polar opposite, it seems to be polar opposite, sides are railing against one another. It just doesn't work. Human beings don't move forward with co-creative and synergistic discoveries and implementations that advance and heal the grievances that are there. So bottom line, it's a call for everyone to up their game and get out of the world of blame. Because you tell me, anytime someone's been blaming you, how that felt to you, or how successful were you when you were just out and out blatantly blaming someone in your life? How successful was that in you getting that person to listen and to change? Now these are, when they blow up into politics and two sides of the aisle, the amplitude is greatly increased and the intensity is greatly increased. Yet how do we change this hostile and divisory tone and bringing governments to halt and polarizing? It's almost like an intellectual civil war. In fact, there are those who are concerned that the American public is splitting in half and is getting back to civil, not war, but uncivil division that's not going to lead to co-creating and solving of problems. Well, what I assert is, and why I began with the individual is, it's going to take us one individual at a time. Each individual getting better and better and better at listening, even when it hurts, letting that other side in. And invariably, because we are human beings, we're all part of the same human family. Our welfare depends on the welfare of all of us. All of us. We all have to be included in this one. There is no human being, or for that matter, animal or rock or tree or cloud that is outside the welfare of all of us. Things aren't going to work until we can turn the tide on this division and this blaming and start listening. Because when I listen, I go, sooner or later when I'm listening to someone who has an issue with me, I go, you know what, there is something in this for me. They are telling me something that if I improve that, my life is going to improve. And that's what I'm calling for, is the ability for us to listen even when it hurts. Because if we listen carefully, for one thing, you're going to observe that the person you're listening to is going to usually tone down almost all the time, because they're getting part of what they want. They're using that initial intensity and blame to try and get you to listen. So if you listen, 9 times out of 10, you're going to watch the temperature go down. They're wanting to communicate, they're wanting to be successful in their communication, and they're being successful because you've opened up and you're not blocking them, you're listening. You're letting it in. And if you let it in, there might or might not come a moment where you go, wow, I really have listened to what you've said. And some of the things you've said, you know what, they really ring a bell. And I'm taking that in. You want me to be more kind under most all circumstances, even if it takes me pulling myself up by my bootstraps. And also in here, I noticed that there was something that I need of you to do that because I don't feel safe. What I'm really heading towards is a hypothetical conversation where because you listened, you were actually able to understand something and communicate back in a way in which you're grateful for this, the strength of the communication and the willingness to be communicated to. It helps you see that there's a change you actually could make, and it may even open the door to bring them into the communication too. Not always. I try to not have that agenda ever. If someone's trying to get something through to me, I don't use that as a time to ask for, yeah, well, you got your list for me, well, I've got my list for you. I don't do that. That is a very ineffective technique. But at the same time, you may have greater understanding, and once you successfully listen to them and start implementing and show them that you're implementing the changes they want from you, there might come a time where you're going to say, wow, in the midst of that discovery and the intensity of the discovery, I saw their part, and at the right time I'm going to communicate that, because timing of communication can be everything. Complex subject, what is it? The golden rule. I was writing an email the other day in which it all came down to, if from the time that Jesus, for example, came out with the golden rule and we had just been following it ever since that time, this would be a different planet entirely. It's do unto others. Now I know the common statement is, as you would like done unto yourself, but my son for one has modified this as they would like to have done unto them. Meaning we're trying to listen to what those we care about need and want really. And we want to give it to them. Because that's what calms the world down. That's where it brings us together, is we're following the golden rule. We're listening to know and to learn what others are wanted, and when it's reasonable and when it's beneficial, and so often it is, we're responding in a way to give them what they want. Of course, there's all kinds of different examples where unreasonable things are being asked for and all kinds of contradictions. There's no way I could be all-inclusive in this topic called listen, even when it hurts. And if you do that, there is a muscle that you are going to build that's going to improve your life, improve the life of others around you, is going to give you more freedom. It's going to help the wonderful teachers in our life, those that we're most up close and personal with, to help us see what we don't see, and to give us little projects that if we do them, everything's going to get more fun. It's going to build trust. It's going to build love. It's moving from this opposition to something that's synergistic. And that's real, because we are all in this together. So it's a plea to listen. To when others are uncomfortable, give them the space, listen to them, and if there's truth in what they're saying, really help them bring about that important truth for all of our lives. My hope and prayer is this approach to just blaming and fighting and dividing, it just doesn't work. And we're running out of room, from my own personal observation, to just be failing continuously at life and the planet Earth, saving the planet Earth. So enough for today. Listen, even when it hurts. And often it will hurt, because someone will be naming, if they're reasonable, something that they're having challenges from you. And if you can hear them, you're going to gain insight to, very often, to behaviors and changes and choices that you make, that if you make them, things are going to improve. It's going to be more fun, more love, more entertainment from this unbelievably entertaining planet that is so rich with beauty. So, I'm Dr. David Rosensweet. You tuned into I Wonder Doctor Live. That we go live with this segment on the emotions and the mind and life at 2 o'clock every Thursday afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to discuss all this out loud with all of you.